Hello, hello to everybody that just joined. We're going to wait just a couple minutes to make sure other people can jump on and get over any tech hurdles or if anybody's running late from school or work. So you just see our floating faces for a minute and we're not speaking. That's what we're doing. So please wait a few minutes while we see other people join.
And while you're here, I would encourage you to please tell us where are you located, the attendees. You want to put it in the chat, and what school are you attending from to kind of like know where you are logging in from.
I think we can also get Ashton to start singing again if y'all want.
Works hard for the money.
Until we get our Spotify, our real Spotify.
Now I'll have to think of other. I think Shania Twain would be in there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, we are 3 minutes into our meeting, so we will get started here. I'm going to share my screen. Make sure you can all see it. Can you all see that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys for joining tonight, panelists and attendees. I am Ashton Brooks. I am the Women in Architecture Chair for AIA Austin. And this week we are doing our College Salon series. We've done this for, I think this is the at least third year. Is it the fourth year, Janki?
I think it's the third with the Salon series name.
Oh, okay. So, and then before that, it was just 1 year before, right? Yes. So we've been doing this virtual panel of series videos or chats for a few years now, and we switch it up every year and try to do a couple different panels and get different people to moderate. We really hope that you get some wonderful learning out of this, and that it's stuff that is beyond the classroom. That's the whole purpose, is to say, hey, there's things that we learned, we'd love to share them. So we cannot do what we do without our wonderful sponsors. So I want to take a minute to just thank them real quick. They are Artesian Hardwood Floors, Bespoke Careers, Contour Collective, Gus Burnell Film, Photo, and Education, Cook McIntyre Construction, Live Oak Builders, McKinney York Architects, Michael Shue Office of Architecture, Miller Imaging and Digital Solutions, Neon Agave Homes, Page, Pilgrim Builders, ProSource Wholesale, Rogers O'Brien Construction, Skelly Build, Texas Tiny Pools, and Word and Card Design Group. If you know anybody at those companies, feel free to tell them thank you for helping to sponsor WiA, because we have so many wonderful activities throughout the year, community events, networking opportunities, and we will do any of it if it weren't for them. So with that being said, we also we have one last night in our College Salon series. It's tomorrow night. If you are in the Austin area, we are having a networking happy hour at one of our sponsors, which is Rogers O'Brien Construction. They are located on South Lamar. Please come. We would love to see you. There's going to be people at all different points of their careers that'll be there to share some of their knowledge and get to mingle and mix. And with that, I'm going to kick it off. I would like to introduce our moderator, Janki DePalma. She is the Director of Business Development at WiA Construction. She is also very involved in Women in Architecture. She has been the subcommittee chair for this initiative and the founder of this initiative for 4 years now.
Oh no.
You're frozen, Ashton.
Oh dear. I thought that might be me.
Yeah.
No.
So I can help it. So yeah, Janki has been the our awesome subcommittee chair for a couple of years now. Ashton, are you back?
I
I
think
am
she's
sorry.
back.
Where did I
Okay.
get cut off?
Okay. Yes, that's why I was stepping in. You can continue.
Janki, did you hear the part where I introduced your title?
Yes. So I'm the Director of Business Development.
Awesome. Okay. Yes, she is the subcommittee chair for this initiative. She founded it and has been running it for 4 years. and she's the incoming chair of the Leadership Collective, which is a wonderful kind of, if you're an emerging professional and looking to get additional experience and learnings after you are out of college, that is a great initiative, and Janki has been involved with that as well. Did I miss anything, Janki?
I am also excited that I'm serving my 5th year as a board member for the AIA Austin board as a public member. So it's a group that I find so much value with, even as a non-practitioner. It's been a great place for me.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll let you take it away.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you guys for being here. I will say, just kind of what's interesting is when we do these virtual salon series, you never know how technology is going to work. And I think that's one of the things that's a big part of our practice is you learn to be flexible and run with it, right? So that's what we're going to be doing today. I'd like to start off by introducing my panelists and kind of giving a little bit of a framework about what we're going to be talking about today. Just so you know, the way I like to do things is I kind of like to explain who our panelists are and sort of like why they were chosen versus giving the whole robust bio. You can learn more about these fabulous women. I will not be doing justice to like how great of an impact they have in our industry, but instead I want to just kind of focus on kind of why we brought them here and what we're going to be talking about. So first and foremost, I have Donna Carter. She is a key leader with the AIA at Austin and beyond. She is an AIA fellow, which for those of you who don't know what that means, it is the highest level of achievement we can have in our in the AIA. And she is someone who's both literally and figuratively changed the design landscape in Austin. She is the founder of Carter Design Associates, and she has always been using her skills and her voice to increase equity, diversity, and amplify other voices. I mean, really, she's somebody who I'm so excited to have us lead this discussion because I think she has so much to say, both in terms of her own career as well as a business owner and someone who sort of mentors and guides other professionals. Next is Valerdy. She is an architect with Perkins and WiA in Houston, and she is part of the Next to Lead cohort for this year, which is a very exclusive program that the AIA has put together that helps amplify the voices of women, particularly from underrepresented groups, and kind of giving them the platform to lead within our industry. She also has achieved such great quick success in her career. She received licensure very quickly and has been super active in other groups within AIA as well as NOMA. And then last but definitely not least is my good friend, Rachel Brehm. She is the Business Development Director at Page in San Antonio. And Rachel has spent her entire career really working with architecture and landscape architecture firms and helping them thrive through connection. And just like me, she is also a non-practitioner. That just means we are officially not architects and are not trained in architecture. And I think she really helps us look at how we can appreciate and understand design outside of sort of like the mystique and ego that sometimes covers design, and just how does design help connect people and places. So with that, I'm super excited to see them all, and we're going to dive into this discussion. One of the nice things about being the chair of the program is occasionally I can just elbow my way in and come up with some really weird topics that I personally want to discuss and I felt are not discussed when I was in school, and no one can say no. So this is one of them. So the topic today is a little bit esoteric, but I feel is one that has constantly plagued me throughout my career, and I feel like it is one that all of us have a lot to say. So officially, the title says confidence versus competence. But really, what I want to talk about is, I'll start it off with this framework that a lot of times the unsolicited constructive criticism that at least I've received, especially early in my career, is this: you need to be more confident. And no one kind of follows up with what that means, what that looks like, any guidance. And it just kind of dropped on me and walked away. And I've been studying this throughout my career, and I began to realize that sometimes confidence, I feel, is so kind of esoteric. It's like, is it more of an affect? Is it just, the way you act versus actually having belief in your understanding of where you are in your career? So I want to ask you guys this first and foremost. Am I the only one who's received this comment? Be more confident at meetings. And then someone just walks away and you're kind of left holding the bag. You all reacted, which is my sign that you have received this feedback. So I'm going to go with my friend Rachel first. I want to hear from you. Have you received this comment? And if so, how did you interpret this? What does it mean to you?
So I have received this comment, and I received it more often earlier in my career. I'm about 20 years into my professional career, all within the AEC industry. As you said, Janki, non-technical, doing marketing or business development for architects, engineers, landscape architects. And I overcompensated is what I did. And so I decided that meant that I needed to wear pinstripe suits, and I needed to speak with confidence and stand by it, whether I was right, wrong, or indifferent, or I knew what I was talking about. And so I skewed it way too much. And now that I'm more mature in my professional career, I think that it's really helpful to have gone through that, because I can also see through those that are kind of faking it till they make it with their confidence. And what I've learned from that is not to call them out on it per se, but to talk, just to understand that it's probably more of an insecurity than anything else, right? Because the reason I was overcompensating was because somebody had pointed out to me, you need to be more confident. And to your point, Janki, what does that mean? Does that mean I don't look confident enough? Does that mean I don't speak up enough? Does that mean that you want to hear my voice louder because I'm soft spoken by nature? So at least for me to interpret. And I think it's taken some time, but I would say I've course corrected that to where I don't wear pinstripe suits. I don't speak up if I don't know, and I don't feel like I always have to speak. There's others that have just as great of ideas or just as knowledgeable as I am. So sometimes it's best just to listen and lend a guiding hand if you feel like it needs to be brought in.
Excellent. One other note, I forgot to mention this. We are a very informal bunch here. So we are figuratively having couch talk at this moment. So even though this is virtual, I want us all to feel free to be able to piggyback in the comments. And if things go really well, we will only be able to go through a couple questions because we'll have so much to add on within each statement. So I do want to ask Donna, because you have a very interesting career, not only yourself as a business owner, but you've been a big part of mentoring and sort of amplifying voices, both in like the architectural space and just, regular people, right? Like, just other people within Austin. When you hear this comment thrown at, especially at certain people, like be more confident, you need to be more confident, especially it always seems to be at meetings. Have you received it? How do you maneuver through this? What do you do?
You're calling me out because I often tell people that.
Ooh, what? So now, okay, what do you mean by that then? When you say be more confident, what do you mean?
Usually I don't say it, be more confident. I usually say, and it's much more about if you have thought of the issue, if you do have things to say, then really plan on how that's going to be said. And when you speak, look people in the eye and say what you have to say with confidence. The downside of that, and this has happened many times, is everyone sort of listens on top of your head. They don't hear what you say. It's just sort of floating there in the room. And we've all had the experience of someone else says exactly the same thing. They happen to be, in my case, they're not usually older, but they are more male and, more something else. And everyone says, oh yeah, that may have been a good idea. I think these truly are two sides of a coin. And what I would also say is, don't let that experience of sort of not being heard keep you from saying things. And I also think it comes down to really the situation is most answers in a group and collaborative situation are not a single answer. And so for me, confidence, if we're going to get back to what that word is, that confidence is the ability to work with other people and see that in many cases, the best design, the best solution, and I wouldn't even say best, but the better of what we are considering will actually come and be enriched by that conversation. And
Interesting.
So for me, confidence is willingness to engage, genuinely within that conversation and not have to win.
So kind of following up on that, I'm going to pick on Nix right now. Do you think that sometimes there is, when someone says to act confident, do you think that is, you have Donna's definition, but then do you think there also is more of like an affect, like a tone or a rate of speech or loudness that people then like assume is confidence versus, the definition that Donna gave, which is much more like, I have something to say that can move this conversation forward. Did I throw you a little?
I was gonna say, can I give Nix a second to think about that and jump in? Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Good.
I have a colleague of mine, and she's about 2 years out of school, and I am thoroughly impressed by her. I love going into the office and chatting with her. She's not afraid to ask questions. She's not afraid to voice her opinion. There's no fear. And I told her just the other day, before I knew I was actually doing this panel, I really I'm proud of her and I'm jealous of her because 24-year-old Rachel is shy and not wanting to speak up, especially as a non-technical or not a licensed architect sitting in that setting where people are throwing around ideas. I'm afraid to speak up. I was afraid to speak up because I don't have that background. I don't have that experience. I don't have that knowledge. But that doesn't mean, to Donna's point, I don't have a good idea. And so I would just encourage people to not have that fear. And if you're in the right environment, that fear won't exist. You will feel seen, you will feel heard, you will feel supported. And that's the way that it should be. And so I love our young staff in our office because they're all growing in that way. And it's just something, and I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know what's in the water, but I'm so proud of them because it's taken so long for me to feel like I could speak up. And there's a lot of layers to that. The non-technical is certainly one of them, but just growing up in the industry when I did, there's a lot to unpack there for another time. But I will say, I don't know that it's necessarily like your volume, but maybe the way that you handle yourself, or the way you're composing yourself that demands a little extra attention. I mean, there's something about sitting like this and talking and like maybe versus sitting up straight and having that kind of just dominance, if you will, of your space, that garners confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm gonna bring up a book that I read a while ago, and hopefully this can help everybody who is feeling like they're quiet, which is actually the title of the book, Quiet.
Susan Cain, yeah.
Yes, Susan Cain, and how it really explains how we are living in a world where the loudest voice is usually the one that gets heard. It's not, doesn't mean that it's the one that's right, but the loudest voice is usually the one that grabs the attention. So our society somehow is based on the people who seem more confident. Those are the ones who you're not going to be talking to. Those who are fast-paced talkers, those who are like in front of everybody. But we tend to think that people who are shy, who are not participating in the room, do not feel confident when they're just like thinking through. They're just like, it's not that they don't want to like jump into something, but sometimes they have a little more insightful perspectives. And I think this can be a token of like comfort for everybody who feels that way. And like, you don't have to, your confidence is your own skin. Like, confidence doesn't look the same way into the other. However, I do believe that people tend to think the loudest ones are the confident ones.
Yes, yeah, I think you're right. I think like leaning into your authentic way of communicating, but understanding that there definitely is kind of what you've referred to as that extrovert bias, or these certain actions that might be seen as more favorable, but not necessarily showing that you have more confidence, or to kind of further our discussion, competence. Do you know what you're talking about? Just because you're talking loudly doesn't mean you know what you're talking about, right? Like you just might be pontificating and not understanding things. So this gets me to my.
I mean, I think there's another element just to really throw your graphs off, so to speak, Janki. And especially within design and creative fields, is where does ego come in? So, because part of the issue is there certainly are people whose personalities demand that attention. And they demand that attention, whether it's speaking, whether it's how they, what their presentations look like. It's a whole host of, again, if I can't come to a collaborative answer, it's because my answer is the right one. And so really, where is ego in terms of competence, in terms of confidence, and in terms of, again, as Nick says, and I think something very valuable to learn, just as we all don't look alike, we all don't come from the same backgrounds, we all will communicate in different ways. Come from an African-American background, we're kind of loud and boisterous. Is that part of the confidence, or is that actually part of essentially our social upbringing? I went to an Ivy League school. You're told to tamper that down a little bit and do it in a certain way. And yet that's where kind of that ego and, oh, you know what? Not only am I here, I was meant to be here, and I'm meant to be here because somebody else shouldn't be, and that's something that's learned. And that becomes part of the kind of scary part of this conversation. If someone
is really interesting
about where do I fit in this scale.
I think that is very interesting, because there's a bit of almost like a shape shifting that can happen where you're like, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I sort of like fall into these roles. You brought up this interesting thing about sort of like, sort of like knowledge and sort of the competence part of it. So I wanted to dive into this area that I've been obsessed about lately. And it has to do with these stages of learning. And I think this might be kind of interesting, especially given our audience, which is all students of some sort. And so basically there's these like, I was reading this book about, it was like a business book, and it was about these like 4 stages of learning. And it kind of goes through sort of an axis of consciousness as well as competence. So you start off unconsciously incompetent. So I think of like, like when I first started learning a language, I don't even know what I don't know. And like I studied Japanese in college. And so those first 2 years, I actually thought I was okay, like a decent student, because I was getting A's. And so I was so like unconsciously incompetent. But then you get to this next level where you become consciously incompetent. So that was me right when I went to Tokyo, where all of a sudden I realized like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. Like nobody understands me. I can't understand anything. I can't read anything. And you become very aware of what you don't know. And then you move to this stage of conscious competence. So you are thinking about everything you sing. So I'm saying the right things, but it takes me a long time, to communicate. And then you finally reach this level that's a little bit more like unconscious competence. So you're kind of able to talk and you're not really thinking about it, and it's almost to that point of fluency. And I'm curious from your guys' point of view, especially like as for students and people who are coming out there, maybe their first couple years as emerging professionals, depending on who they are, you might be suddenly hitting that conscious incompetence stage. So you go to architecture school and you think you actually kind of know something. You're feeling pretty good about yourself because you don't know what you don't know. And then once you're in these stages where you're consciously either incompetent or competent, you're feeling like like your sense of self can really take a hit. So I'm curious from your point of view, did any of you guys feel this? Like this is called the valley of despair, where all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, like I thought I knew something and I guess I don't know anything. Have you experienced that in your career? And if you have, how did you like talk yourself to say, no, you know what? I'm going to keep going. Yes, I'm getting stuff wrong. Yes, everything I submit keeps coming back to me with errors, but I am moving forward. Like how have you dealt with that? Who wants to? I'll make you raise your hands. I don't have to like, okay, Nick has ideas. Okay, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, because they just like very recently, not necessarily from transitioning from school into work, but
Mhm.
more into like being the one in the OAs, in the owner, architect, and contractor
Mhm.
meetings. Um, like being there for several months, not being the only one, but still representing, doing the work, responding all of the questions of the contractor, looking at the drawings, looking at specifications, looking at everything. But still, my partner, my architect partner, pointed out that I was afraid to shout out or to respond to the answers of the contractor, and so it was more of he did give me the be more confident talk at that point. But to your surprise, he did not just like leave me there. He was actually like, this is what I mean. You know what the work is. You went to school. You're an architect. You are licensed. You have the experience. You work on this project. You know the answers. Go in there and just shout them out. Like they respect you. They like when you come to the construction site because they know you have the answers.
Mhm.
So it was more of like looking at the evidence that you have, all of the things that you've accomplished, and then having a read of the room, like nobody else knows the answers. Nobody else is thinking the ways that you're bringing them in, because you have your own perspective that you work so hard through to get to it.
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
I love what you said. And it's funny because I had a mentor who was in this protege in this exact situation, and I remember it can be daunting. How do you keep in your inside that assessment of what you have done? Because sometimes it's really easy to get overwhelmed by what you don't know, like especially as you're consciously moving through your career, right? Like you're consciously aware of your mistakes.
Yeah.
How do you still like keep track of like, oh, you know what? I've actually still moved like I've actually, moved forward. Like I am learning, I am growing. Can you tell me a little bit about that for yourself?
I ask around to my peers and people ahead of me and people behind me. So I ask them, what are you doing on your day-to-day job? What is your role? What type of projects are you doing? And what is your day-to-day? So I can see how much they're doing. And then, well, I like to have metrics and kind of checkpoints of things. I know not everybody works that way, but I like to compare things one on the other. I know that comparison is a thief of joy, but it can be also joyful when you know exactly where you're standing. um, but yeah, I ask around people who have more experience than me, people who don't have experience, people who are outside of the project that I'm not working, and I ask for a lot of feedback. I with everybody that I work with, I tell them, do you think I'm doing a good job on this? Do you think where can I improve? What are the things that I can stop doing? What am I unaware of? And they tell me the things that I'm good at that I'm not aware.
That's interesting. I like I'll Rachel, you next, but I like this idea too. It sounds like it's less about comparison and more like mile markers. Like it seems like when you're talking about trying to keep metrics and that I want to put a pin in that because I'm obsessed about that. But I think it's interesting because it's really easy to get stuck in that valley where you're like, did I make the right choice? Because I keep making mistakes. And to, have these things that kind of validate that you are moving forward in whatever capacity is it's a very smart one. I really like that.
There's
Rachel,
a reason within myself, I think that
Mhm.
is the distinctive. Yeah, Rachel.
So my name's Rachel, and I'm in the Valley of Despair. So I joined Page about 4 months ago, and anytime you have a job change like that, you feel like so lost, and you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And this isn't what I expected, or oh my gosh, I'm not performing to the level that they think or want me to be. I'm a horrible employee. And so much like Nick's, I'm asking for the feedback, and I'm also raising my hand and letting people know, like, hey, I'm not sure I understand that correctly. Do you mind walking me through it? Or could you provide me examples? Or can I tag along or just be a fly on the wall for this conversation or meeting so that I'm making sure I'm understanding the direction that Paige wants me to go in? Because I actually had a young woman ask me to be her mentor. I told Janki, because Janki's kind of my unofficial mentor in a way. And so I was like, somebody asked me, and it was so sweet. I felt like I was getting proposed to at lunch. It was sweet. And she asked me, well, what kind of business development do you do? And I had this very quizzical, like, personal? Like, what do you mean? Because I like to build relationships. And she goes, no, no, no. Are you more the operations strategy behind it? Do you like to do the research and understand the client? Or are you forward facing and meeting with a lot of people? And I'm like, I've never quantified that before. I've never in almost 20 years sat down and been like, there are types of business development. And I realized that my company does a lot more operational business development in my role than the forward facing personal. Doesn't mean that they don't want both, but just the people who are in my role tend to be more of the strategic thinkers. And I'm like, aha, that's what I've been doing wrong. I've been trying to go out there and be the face and meet with all these people. And to your point, Janki, I think you and I had a conversation about this, kind of play my ace cards, right? Like, I know that person. I can get a meeting with that company, and trying to do that without taking a step back and being more strategic and thoughtful about it. So that conversation helped, but also talking to my counterparts in the different office, to Nick's point, and asking them, how do you do this? How would you handle this situation? Or can I listen in because I have a client I'm trying to learn more about, and I just want to see how you're doing a capture plan for this client. So please don't be afraid to ask and check in and see how you're doing. It's not a bad thing to get feedback.
so Donna, having both as a business owner, and I know you're officially and unofficially a mentor to many people, this valley of despair, do you see this? Am I making it up? Like,
no, all the time. So I'm looking at it as an employer. Okay. I have young people that will come in. I have people that have been in the office for, 20 years. And so the interesting thing is we specialize, but our specialty is, preservation. So that can be anything from a doghouse to a train station to, a space station. I mean, it really can be anything. And we also do planning, and we sort of, dump the whole urban design thing on top of it. And so I have a young architect coming out of school, and I say, oh, we're going to be doing a restoration of a smokehouse. And I'm stared back a deer in headlights. How do I find out what a program is for a smokehouse? How do I, or what does, how does preservation change that? And so quite honestly, I just tell people, take a step back, and you actually, I hope you liked school, because you can actually look at this as, education for the rest of your life. You become, the old TV show, The Pretender. No matter what project you're on, you suddenly become this little mini expert, but you do it by learning in whatever style you learn best. And so you don't have to be expert day one. You actually don't need to be an expert at the end, but you do need to be competent. And for me, it's about it's about how you go about gaining those new pieces, those new skill sets that you need for this particular project. And hopefully that's what keeps it fresh and interesting and actually comforting, because you know day one, I'm not going to expect you to be that expert. And most of our clients come to us because they know, no, we're not an education studio. Education isn't everything we do. It's because we have the ability to marry many different things with a complex question on sometimes very small, very, um, absolutely unique types of projects. So it's that willingness to kind of jump in feet first and, and then ask for the lifer as opposed to getting it all tied on, right? And then, then putting your little toe in and saying, maybe I didn't need the life vest after all.
I have a follow-up question. And this is to anybody on the panel that wants to answer this, but Donna, it's something you just said. Do you find that those that jump in to the deep end without assuring their life vest is tied properly necessarily, they gain that confidence and competence quicker than those that maybe are a little bit more timid to jump in both feet first?
That's a good question. It's almost like which parenting style works.
Yeah.
And I actually think that any skill that I might have is determining, without putting a sign around someone's neck, which style works for them.
Yeah.
So again, part of it is having an understanding that everybody's a little bit different. The only thing that doesn't work, I'll be honest, doesn't work in our office is if someone can't figure out how to get into the pool. And I have had people, in other words, they want to know, oh, I am a draft person, or I'm a CAD person, this is my job, that's really all I'm going to do. And they're kind of sitting there with blinders on. And they may be very good, not only competent, but confident. That they know exactly how to wrench every piece out of that software. But in fact, in a small office where we have to talk about all of these things, that's not what our office needs. And
Right.
so, yeah,
And that was a conversation on the series that just earlier this week, right? Was finding the right size firm for you. And I think that's a great lesson for everybody. The reason I ask is because I learned, and Nix, I didn't mean to cut you out at all if you have something to add to that, and Janki too. I learned that I became more competent and confident when I just became myself. I stopped trying to be everything everybody else wanted me to be. I stopped trying to be you need to be more confident, you need to look this way, you need to speak this way, you need to do this. And I was just myself. I found that that's when people started like, okay, she's got it. She knows what she's doing. So I was just curious if there's maybe a fast track to
no. And that's what I say in terms of, I have to know what that and who that person is, because as I said, the deep end isn't going to work for everybody, and holding them back isn't going to work for the other person. So yeah, it's a lot about figuring out how you work. But I will say that, and especially since we're students here, what you learn today, in 5 years, what you learned and memorized is not going to really help you. How you learned it today is really what's going to continue to take you forward, because everything's changing. And I've been at this longer than anybody here in the room. I've been at this literally since 1979. And the wall section that I drew in 1980 wouldn't pass code today. The materials that I used in 1980 either are, have been banned or, we found something else about it. So if, and we laugh at continuing education, it's not just continuing education and going hearing a lecture about something. It's about the ability to go and ferret that out for yourself. And to me, that's where confidence comes from. Knowing that if I don't know the answer, that I'm not dead in the water. I can actually go and find the answer. I am going to learn that answer.
And if I may add to that, I think it goes into overvaluing expertise, because like we're never going to learn it all. We're never going to know everything. But what's a key differentiator is how we come across asking the questions of what we don't know, how we find out the solution to something. So therefore, you need to be aware of the things that we don't know, and knowing when to ask for help and when to ask for questions, so that we can get out of there faster.
Yes.
It's Fancy Nancy, Janki. It's
Well,
Fancy Nancy.
I think, hold on. So, I mean, I think you're bringing up this really interesting point about like kind of embracing a growth mindset, and this kind of goes back to the work of Carol Dweck. She's a professor at Stanford, and she had kind of coined that term. And it really just has to do with a concept that like there's some people who think like talent is fixed. Like you have like, and so you're like, you're smart, you're artistic, you're whatever. And then there's another group of people who just believe that hard work and learning can always move you forward. And in these two camps, you find that people who embrace this growth mindset don't necessarily see asking questions as an indictment on their abilities, because they're kind of like, well, yeah, I don't know this yet, hence I'm asking the question and I'm getting better. Versus sometimes you see more of an old school mentality, like if I ask this, they'll realize like I don't know it, and then they're going to wonder, why did they hire me? And I will, like, I don't want to show anybody that I've maybe reached my limit of talent, so I'm just going to be quiet and sort of now this is where the Fancy Nancy comes in, because Rachel likes this. It's like I will just try to like figure my own way out through the mess. And that never works out, right? Like you need to step up, but it's sort of that fear, right? Of like, I don't want to look stupid because then maybe I've hit my limit. So I kind of want to chat with you guys about that, because I believe all of you have talked about this. There's a confidence in being able to say, I don't know.
I think
How do
there's
you
a
own
confidence
that?
and competence in
Confidence.
being
Yeah, you're
able
like,
to
I don't know the
say,
answer to this. Yeah.
yeah. And I think it takes some maturity to get there. At least in my case, it certainly took maturity to get there, because it wasn't necessarily a fear that I would look stupid. It was a fear, to your point, Jakey, like, oh my gosh, they're going to be like, why did we hire you? And I don't want to lose my job. It's my livelihood, or it's a pride thing, right? And then I think that the older I got, the more I realized it's okay to not know things, and it's okay to ask for help. But to Nix's point, the way you go about asking it, or my big thing is try. I say that and then I'm like, I hate Fancy Nancy. For those that don't know, Fancy Nancy is a Disney cartoon, and she always gets in trouble and tries to get herself out of trouble and makes the situation 10 times worse. So I didn't like my kids watch Fancy Nancy, because I figured they would just try to get themselves out of trouble. So it was banned
They're
in my
not
house.
learning from her mistakes.
Yeah. We're not watching Fancy Nancy. But I was now I forget what I was going with, because now I'm thinking about Fancy Nancy. But it was to Nix's point, how you come across asking for help. I always like for people to try to get over that wall, right? I always equate it to, you've hit a brick wall. Have you tried to go around it? Have you tried to go over it? Have you tried to dig under it? Have you tried to go through it? Okay, if you've tried and you still can't, like, yes, let's sit down, let's figure out life together. But yeah, I think there's ways to go about doing that, that make you look like you're trying to learn, versus like, I don't want to even try to figure out the answer. Just give it to me, right?
But I guess there's a little bit of a caution in all of this, because what we've been talking about, I think, works best if you're in an environment where there is certainly a modicum of safety, that there are people there that ultimately are supporting you. It can be a very different experience if you're in a place where you feel that people are just looking for one reason to get rid of you. And
That's very true.
unfortunately, I think that we still have situations, or you have to be aware and not get yourself there, because I think there are still places of employment that may function very much like that. And so we are in probably kind of a strange time in terms of the speed with which our profession is changing, the overlap from, construction to manufacturing to, buying kits of parts and just putting them together. Where's the architect in that? Where, we have people here working for construction companies, for other types of companies, not, Janki and Rachel, they're non-practitioners, yet we are going to see that there's going to be an overlap of where people, are employed. So I think one of the hard things about being young is figuring out in these employment situations whether you're in a supportive environment or not. And my mother always sort of said to me, this is 100 years ago, literally, I just want to live long enough so that when you're being abused, when you're being mistreated, and know that you can take care of yourself. So for me, part of education is knowing when you're being taken advantage of, knowing if something isn't quite right, and then being able to definitely speak up about it or change your situation. So getting to that level is really is something that, I like to work with students so that they, have an understanding of what they might find out there, because it ain't all
I mean,
roses.
I mean, this point about psychological safety, I mean, that's really what you're talking about. Like, you to be able to admit what you don't know and to actually have like that growth mindset only works in a situation where you are safe to ask those questions and learn, and your mistakes are not held against you, right? Because otherwise it's and I think that is a very, all of you have alluded to also just where your personal professional network comes in too, right? To kind of be a sounding board to see, like, is this normal? Are these feelings valid that I have? Is it my own sense of falling into a fixed mindset, or is this actually something that it's a firm situation where maybe there's a misalignment, right? And I don't have the ability to ask questions.
Right. Or I don't have ability to change it.
Exactly. Yes. That's very, very true.
It's definitely a good sign that it's not a good place for growth to stay around. Like if you are trying to ask questions and it's not even a safe space where your curiosity is being valued, and if there is not the safety where people is willing to teach you more other things, then it's a good sign that that's perhaps not a good fit for you to continue your development and your growth.
Yes, I think that is a really good marker to realize, because I think a lot of times people will then misinterpret that as like a imposter syndrome. But in reality, it's sort of the environment they're in that's forcing you to feel like, oh, I need to be perfect. I can't ask questions, and your growth isn't like celebrated or allowed to happen. I had one other question, and this one I did mention this when we were talking before. So I was doing some research about confidence and competence. And there was this interesting finding that I found with these two social scientists in the late 90s had they identified this bias. So it's this Dunning-Kruger effect. And basically it's this concept that when you know a smidge about something, you have so much confidence. And so the people who barely know anything will often just kind of hand wave how easy it is to do something. And then as you actually start studying, you kind of fall into this valley of despair. And then once you get higher up, you still also know like what you don't know. So I'm curious if you've found in your career people who just barely know what it is you do, acting like they could do your job so much better and easier. So someone who's like kind of knows a little bit about business development, thinks that it's like no big deal to do this, or someone who, maybe watched a couple HGTV shows, things like architecture. How hard can it be? Like, have you experienced this in your career? And like, if so, how have you dealt with that?
I've been that person. I'll fess
I
up.
was going to say that's me.
Oh no.
Yeah, no, I admit it.
That's cool. It's a bias. It's not like necessarily, it's a normal thing, but
and ask my husband. He's always accusing me of that. So
I'm
very
going to
cool.
chalk it up to being curious, though, because if I find something out that intrigues or interests me, I want to talk about it more.
Mhm.
And so, again, to your point, I was just at a luncheon yesterday about the future of downtown San Antonio. And one of the panelists talked about how they were working with the San Antonio Police Officers Association and another union for the police my husband happens to work for. And so I immediately wanted to call him after the luncheon and talk to him about this thing that the panelist said. And he's like, I don't know more about it. Can you tell me more about it? And I'm like, no, but I really want to talk about it, right? And so I think some of that might also just be a little bit of curiousness of wanting to talk more about a subject or a topic that really interests you, but you don't know too terribly much about it. Or you like read the Cliff Notes version, right? And you're like, oh, I can handle this. And then you get into a conversation with somebody that does know what they're talking about. I had that at ULI. I'm part of a Heat Island study that we're looking into. And I'm like, I know about Heat Island. I worked for landscape architects that taught me all about it. And then I get in this room and there's all these experts talking about like logistics. And I'm like, oh, it's not just because the concrete's hot. There's like more to this, right? And so it was just one of those imposter syndromes where I'm like, I can really help this group out. And now I'm the one learning from the group. So yeah, I'm still there.
I think that's really interesting where your enthusiasm comes in, but then it's still couched with a little bit of humility, right? Like once you realize that there is more to this, you're like, okay, great. Like I understand this. We are nearly at the top of the hour. So I wanted to ask you guys a couple more questions and then kind of open it up for our attendees to chime in some questions. So heads up, whoever's there in the back, I can't see you, but if you have questions for the crew, pop them in the chat and then we will ask them. But I wanted to have this one question for all of you to explore. And this is really kind of like an advice to your past self, I guess, question. So I want you to address 24-year-old you. Okay. Kind of out of school, starting to work, maybe, kind of getting into your first gig, and it might not have been 24, it might have been a little bit younger, a little bit older. I'm just kind of throwing out a number here. And if you were mentoring 24-year-old you and you had said, oh, I just came from a meeting and my boss told me to be more confident and I don't know what to do. Like, I just feel like everything I do is wrong, or I keep making all these mistakes. Like, is this the right thing for me? What advice would you have given your young you regarding like confidence, competence, understanding your place in this world and that whole thing? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I feel like I've gone first on everyone, so I was trying to sit here, but
no, go for it.
I actually tell I have two young daughters. I have a 12, almost 13-year-old and a 5, almost 6-year-old. And my 12-year-old got asked to the dance tomorrow night. And she was actually really she was excited about it. You could tell, but she's like, but my friend really wanted to go with him and he asked me. And I'm like, listen, don't let somebody else stomp your joy out, right? Don't let them diminish your light. Be happy, be okay. And this too shall pass, right? But if I was to give my 24-year-old self advice, it'd be like, hang in there, kitty. Like, you know what you're talking about. Don't let them diminish what you know. Don't let them question it. Keep being who you are, and you will come out the other side better and stronger for it.
I love that. I love that very much. Any other one? People who would have advice for their past selves?
Get some sleep.
Never enough.
Never enough sleep if you're an architect. You know, and I'm trying to think where I was at 24. I think I was probably just out of getting my master's, because I'd gone to a traditional liberal arts BA program and then taken a year off. I'd actually gotten married. And I think I was into my first job. And the story of my first job is I was hired, it was a partnership. I was hired by a partner and nobody else in the firm knew I had been hired. So until I showed up one day and said, yeah, and I want to get paid. And I was paid next to nothing. But so in a funny way, this person saw something in me, and I was being hired as a designer. I would be working directly with this person, and he hadn't told his partner. It was in some ways the opposite of the question that you're asking. And so yes, I worked on designs, and one of the first ones, literally, I'm called into the room. There are all these strange people in gray suits with things hanging out of their ear, and Lady Bird Johnson comes in to review the designs.
Oh my gosh.
So, so what do you do? They weren't asking me direct questions, but we had to put the model together. We had to sort of explain. So I think part of it is what I would tell the 24-year-old me, and what I did was, and it sounds almost the opposite of what we've been talking about, but rise to that occasion. And at some point, I mean, obviously I wasn't going to do a lot of talking in that, but you rise to the occasion, you are there. If a question is asked, you answer it. And don't question why I was in the room. So there were a lot of places I sort of questioned, well, why am I here? Have they just trotted me out for some ulterior motive that I don't know? So I would tell myself, don't question why I'm there.
That's a one that I'd love to keep saying to myself now at twice of 24.
Yeah, and I will follow that by two short comments. You're there to learn, like to my 24-year self, or starting my first job. You're there to learn. They don't expect you to know everything, and take space. Like literally, when you come into the meetings, into the room, into your work, just take your space, because that's what you're there for.
That's a good point, and that's one I wanted to mention and completely forgot. So thank you. But I also used to kind of sit on the side or give up my seat, and I'm not saying don't, but I'm saying, like, no, you are there for a reason. You've been invited to the meeting. Don't feel like you have to sit in the corner just because you don't have as many years of experience as those actually sitting at the table.
Yes, that's very true. I think sometimes there's a sense that a lot of times, like, you want to defer when no one's asked you to defer. And that's a really good point, to take up space and just say that you were invited for a reason. So you should be there. I did see some things pop up in the chat, and I'm going to see if I could look it out. So when we talked earlier about technical difficulties, so my laptop stopped working, so I'm on an iPad. So I'm going to see if I can see some of the questions.
I can see the questions.
Yeah, as I say, do you want us to read them? Yeah.
Yeah, can one of you guys read the questions?
Sure. How do you handle situations where you feel confident, but later realize your competence is lacking? How do you recover from that?
Nice. Okay. Who wants to field that one?
Oh, Nix.
I muted, unmuted. Well, I I think the first impulse will be like, sorry, I didn't know that. But then I've also heard the advice of don't apologize. So don't say you're sorry for not knowing that. And it feels like it goes back to saying like you're just there to learn. Like if you don't know, you're gonna learn from this. If somebody else knows better, then we'll follow up with them and ask them for guidance.
Yeah, I would tack
I
on to, oh, sorry,
think,
Janki.
yeah.
Janki, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So, oh,
I would say for me, I think there's actually something extremely competent about saying, I know we were talking about this and I really thought the answer was X, but I did more research and it's actually Y. And I think you don't have to apologize, but it just shows maybe a commitment to what you were to really like understanding your craft is to say, I did more research. So turns out this is what the code says, or this is, the requirement or something like that.
And again, from a business owner's point of view, we stress that one of the things that we bring to the table is a form of transparency. So even at the highest level, you're not going to hide a mistake. You have to own a mistake. You have to bring it up, and we're going to solve the issue. And this can be whether something's, not fully explained or incorrect in the drawings or doesn't match a sheet 3 pages later. I mean, you have to own up to these things. And so the question is, how do you do it? And I think you just do it from the point of view, we're all, as Janki said, oh, I found out this is the answer. It's Y and it wasn't Z. And I think you do it not from, and again, this is how do you say it? You don't do it from a cowering position. You don't do it from an aggressive position. You just do it from, this is a statement of fact.
yeah, I was going to say stay humble. And if it's a mistake that you don't point out, but somebody points out to you, it happened to me the other day. I billed something wrong and accounting sent me an email and said, you've billed this wrong. And I told them I did not know the process. I'm glad that they taught me the right process, that I will move going forward. And everything was fine. And we all smiled and moved on with our day. And so I think just being humble and just saying, this is a lesson that I have now learned and we'll move on from here goes a long way.
You all mentioned evaluating yourself for place markers, but not in a comparison way. So how do you practically suggest evaluating your own competence to understand where your confidence should or should not be placed?
Ooh, Nix, I told you we're putting a pin in this. So what were the metrics?
Well, I'm gonna give an example that's very straightforward, but I think it can translate to other things. I measure my time when I'm learning something. So if this week I learned on the topic like 5 hours, then to do better on the next week, I'm gonna study 5.5 hours, and then go back and review the material that I've studied. This is what I was doing when I was studying for my exams. So I know that this week I did better than the last week because I'm actually retaining more the information and I'm putting more effort into the study materials that I'm going through. But journaling has really helped a lot. You do a lot of introspection and assess how you are feeling at the end of the day or at the end of the week. I honestly don't do it every day. I just do it like at every week, and feel how I felt my workload this week versus other weeks, and trying to note down what were the highlights of the week, what were like the new things I learned or the accomplishments that I had throughout the week. I think that helps you see throughout the day, especially because I have my journal, so I can flip through it and see how I've grown from what I was last year.
I think another thing is really learn your body. And one of the things that I've found is, and it's a little bit like, what was I doing last week? What last week, in a sense, gave me heartburn, literally, or, and that's why I said learn your body, because you can feel how your body changes when you're in a tense situation or you're nervous, and you actually learn the difference between, that sort of fear versus just being nervous versus, ooh, I really don't think I'm prepared for this. And if you learn how your body feels, then what you will also learn as you go forward, let's say you're supposed to give a talk to somebody. And oh, the first time I did that, I really had a knot in my stomach and I got dry mouth and something else happened. And I realized that, well, after the fifth talk, I wasn't getting those bodily reactions to what I was doing. And it sounds silly, but I'm sort of come from the sports side, and preparing yourself, literally what you eat, how you sleep, when you do certain things, there are certain things that you can do so that you learn how your body reacts and you use that to your advantage.
And I'd tack on, I know I'm a horse of a different color because I'm not the technical expert, but I'm a business development expert that I tend to fill somebody else's shoes when they've left, right? My position tends to only become available when somebody else has left that position, making it available for me. But I try to keep in mind, you want to emulate, don't replicate. Be yourself, because I'm not going to do the job the exact same way that the person that came before me did. And that shouldn't be the expectation of your company. You should bring your own lens to it, your own experience to it. And so I do check in with my counterparts across the country about what they're working on and how they do it. And I am envious of some of their methods and I try to adopt them, but it doesn't necessarily work for me. And so I could kill myself trying to be them, but I'm not them, I'm me. And I'm going to do my job to the best of my ability, the way that works best for me. And so it's great to understand where other people are or some of their methods that they like to use, but it may not be a method that you should adopt because it may not work for you. But just understanding what's out there and how people execute their jobs, especially those that you're seeing that are doing a really good job, and you want to learn more from them, talk to them and figure out, maybe you could pick up some tips and tricks, but it wouldn't be taking exactly what they do and plugging it into your role. Make it your own.
I think there's something really interesting about trying to move away from a competitive mindset. So when you start seeing that you're really running your own race, even if you're, let's say, at a firm with other people and you do feel a competitive vibe, because I have been in cases like that, but just to kind of see oh, how do you do this? And is that something that's why, I'll call Rachel and say how are you doing this? And then even, when we have been competitors in the past, and then see oh, is this a little tool I could use too, but not necessarily being so afraid to ask, because sometimes you get so, I've been someone who's often been so competitive that I don't even want to talk to that other person, because just the fact that they're there bothers me. And now I sort of see that everyone's kind of hustling in their own way, and everyone's just trying to survive. So sometimes if there's something I could learn from you, that would be great.
And that's interesting what you're mentioning is knowing what are your strengths and bringing in your personal flavor to things, because you may achieve to the same results that somebody else is doing it, but using different strengths. Like I've heard a lot of people who say oh, you're really good at going to networking events, and they're yeah, but I'm an introvert. But yeah, but you're an introvert, then does that mean that you have to be an extrovert to be very good at networking events? No, it just means that you know how to recharge yourself and how to prepare so you can give the best into that. But I don't like doing small talk. Well, if you don't like doing small talk, then talk about the things that you think are interesting for you so you can have an actually good conversation with that other person. So there is different ways that you can get to the same results, just being true to yourself. Going back to what Rachel was saying, and just being comfortable with your own skin.
I think that's the only thing that's sustainable, is you being authentic to who you are. When you try to emulate or really shape shift, that's not a very long-term strategy that you can continually uphold.
And I don't know if you're going to end us with like, what's the one piece of advice you'd give the audience or one takeaway, but I'm going to spoiler alert mine. And that would be be authentic. That's my number one thing in life. And what I've learned is just be authentic.
Very cool. I see some more things popping in the chat. Let's see.
Ooh, how to be less. So I always get nervous before presenting my projects to reviewers. Is there anything you would recommend doing to be less nervous?
Is this where you like pretend they're in their underwear or something? Like
that kind of never worked for me, but I mean, first, so it's, to me, it would be a 3-step process. The first step is kind of knowing yourself. What is it about this that is making you nervous? If you know a little bit about yourself, then you can sort of devise a strategy about how to get over that. If it's you don't like to speak in front of people, you get kind of tongue-tied, then there may be make the presentation as simple as possible. I remember when my daughter was doing her thesis kind of defense, everybody had fancy PowerPoints and they were pushing buttons, but there were always technical difficulties. So she got up and said, I'm just going to speak. I'm going to make 3 points. And she just did that. And she did it all off of note cards because that was what was comfortable for her. So, I think that, part of it is your presentation doesn't have to be like everybody else's. Do a presentation that you're comfortable with. If it's not as fancy as somebody's, that's fine. But I think if you're comfortable with it and you know exactly what you want to say, then that's the presentation you make. And I don't know how to stress that enough, because I remember when I was in school, and that was a long time ago, before computers, everything was hand drawn. We had some people that could just sketch, without a ruler, without a parallel bar, without P-square, they could just do everything. I was a very technical graphic person, and I just had to lean into that because I knew I wasn't going to be able to lean into the hand presentation. And I had to get over being, whether you want to say envious, jealous, or just, gee, I wish I could do that, had to get over those kinds of feelings for that presentation.
I'll say one thing. I present not in that same capacity as the students are, because I think the element of getting critiqued is legitimate, and I could imagine that also be very frightful. One thing that has helped me over the years is, so the older I get, the more amazed I am that, like, internally, I'm still like forever 35. Like, I just feel like I just kind of am, earlier in my career, and I just feel like the circle of like who's my age is wider and wider. But I'm always surprised when someone comes to me very reverently, because I don't feel like I'm like someone who you should be calling Mrs. anything, like they'll be very like, oh my gosh. And it's interesting. So I have a son who's in college, and I'll often tell him, like, this person who you're tiptoeing around, like, he's like our age. He's a dad. He's, it kind of like to realize that there's like a humanity to whoever you're talking to. And sometimes it's really easy to sort of look at a professor or like I've seen this, where someone looks at a principal that way, like, oh my gosh, he's a, high powered whoever. But it's like they still put their pants on one leg at a time, right? There's still someone's dad, someone's rolling their eyes at their jokes. Like it helps me get less nervous when I talk to people who are important, if I try to remember that, like, someone is actually afraid to talk to me, and I find myself the least intimidating person out there. So just like that, like, if you try to find a way to see the humanity of someone, perhaps that could also help alleviate some of your nerves.
Well, and to add on to that, because again, I have never done a presentation in that manner before either, but Janki has forced me to present to many conferences, and I'm petrified of public speaking. I actually kind of had this blackout moment where I can't repeat what I just said because I don't know what I just said. But I will say, being part of so many different firms throughout my career, those that go and are the reviewers are so excited and want to be mentoring and want to be hearing from you and want to be helping you, that they're not looking to tear it apart and like, I can't wait to go find the holes and the mistakes. They're really genuinely interested. And almost every single time I hear somebody come back from review say, I've learned something from that. So you're teaching them as much as they're teaching you. So hopefully that puts a little bit of a stigma of it's you don't let it be scary. To Jackie's point, they're humans and they want to be there. They signed up to do that, guys. So they're really interested to help.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that comment, look at the jury review as a collaboration. Like they're not there to critique you, and I get that because as students we work on our projects and we feel like they're our babies and they're a piece of ourselves, but it is not. It is a product that you put a lot of effort into, and you should be proud of it yourself. But just because they're critiquing your project is not a personal attack to yourself. And think of them as experts that you can tap their brains in to make your project better. So they're there to collaborate with you to make your project even better than what it already is. It has your perspective. Imagine how much better it is if you have, I don't know, whatever architect you admire, and now they're gonna come be one of your reviewers. Now you get to say that you collaborated on a project with that architect. So I think that would be one cool thing to think about it. Other thing that might help you is, which I used to do it when I was in school. I will like have the Superwoman stance and just like set your ground. Yes, that one. And then third is nobody else knows the project as much as you do because you're the one that has put as much work into your presentation.
Right. And I would also say, I'm always kind of Debbie Downer, but reviews like you're having in college actually never end. Your client reviews your documents. They have, they have other architects, engineers on the project. So we send in a set of documents, and you know what? We get red lines back. Oh, you didn't, you didn't hear us when we said this is the way the lock should go, or don't you really mean this note to say this? And again, to Nix's point, it is making the project better. So yeah, are there some things that get caught that am I embarrassed? Yeah, a little bit. I should have, you want your documents to be perfect, but they're not going to be perfect. And you want to quote unquote sell the client on your design. And you know what? Oh no, not only do I hate blue, but I hate, rectangular windows that are 3 feet long. Whatever the deal is. And you know what? I still want the project. I'm going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to get a 4-foot window or a 2-foot window, or, and it's not going to be blue. So, and that's where it really kind of gets back to the ego. I quite honestly always tell my clients, I mean, this is your building. And it sounds crass, but I get to walk away at the end. You have to live in it. You have to work with it. It has to do what you need it to do. So, we need to get it right. So, I mean, I think, and when you say that, it should, get back to the body thing. It should make your body feel a lot better, that, it's not tied up in a knot. This is just trying to get to an answer that works for your client. So.
Hello.
So
Oh, sorry.
Sophia.
Yay! I was going to say we open it up to whoever wants
Mhm.
to. Way to be confident.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to ask a quick question since I know we don't have that much time. But hi, my name is Sophia. I'm currently a fifth-year student and soon to graduate from architecture. And one of my questions was, well, first I wanted to thank you guys for such an insightful conversation. This is definitely something that I love to talk about, and I could probably talk about it for hours. And to comment on that and thinking about being a lifelong student, despite the fact that, I'll be losing my credentials soon. However, I still pride myself on being a student in every aspect of life. And even so that I love reading. There's a book that I wanted to kind of put out there called Deep Work by Cal Newport. So he kind of dives into all the aspects of learning and the importance of knowing yourself enough and how you learn so that you can become someone successful. Because again, like how Donna mentioned, like life changes so quickly.
Carlos,
Super often.
YouTube and Gallison.
1 second.
Actually, would you mind chatting that book for me in the chat?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just put a hold on it in the library. Yeah, it's called Deep Work. When she mentioned it, I just did it. It's
So how
by
quick is that? Thank you.
Yeah, it's one of those.
Sure. Sorry, I'm part of Janki's book club, unofficial book club.
yeah.
She just tells me what to read.
Cal Newport. So I just put a hold on it. So, and there's an audio version. So the Austin Public Library has it.
Okay,
Very
sorry
good.
about that. So yeah, my question was, wanting to be a lifelong student, what are some of the ways that in this profession you have found in your many years of, being an adult? How is it that you can still keep that student mindset?
Google is your friend. It's also your enemy. Actually, when we do projects, again, our projects are varied. So I often have to find out a little bit more about what that client does, how does their thing work? And that just becomes interesting. And so for me, it's not how do I keep that spirit? It's like, how do I, tamp it down and actually get my work done? Because there are so many interesting things, so many things that are changing now that it's just, it's very exciting. I think a piece of that question is, how do you do it in a way that is not only satisfying, but is useful? So I think part of it is figuring out how to, what kernels. And if you look at my career, let's say we started out, it was T-square, and then it went to parallel rule. We had rapidograph pins. I actually started with a graphing ruling pin. So things change. I mean, just how we do our work has changed. It was incredibly exciting as the computer became a tool, from a little, 10-inch green and black screen that, AutoCAD ran on in the day, to what we're doing now. And that's a kind of education. I mean, I'm not nearly as fluent in all of that as you guys are, but I keep reading about it, and I keep, dipping my finger into it, because that's part of the learning. So I think it's much more learn, have it be be useful. But it really is just, if you have a question about it, take a few minutes and read it and do something.
I would also say use that when you're searching for the firms to work for, because there are some firms that can offer you multiple project types to work on, or different disciplines within the firm that you can also learn from. I mean, not to plug Page, but to plug Page. We're a 1,421 office firm that offers architecture, engineering, graphics, wayfinding, all the things, and there's all these 10 different market sectors that we're experts in, and there's always teams that are moving from aviation to government to academic. And so if that's something that you want to keep you on your toes and want to try different project types out, I would encourage you to look for firms that have those opportunities for you when you apply. And then there's always, from a third party, because again, I'm not working on the actual architectural project team, but the people that I know that have moved quickly, I will say, through the ranks are those that stay curious and ask questions and bring things to the table. Next, Janki and I were at the Women's Leadership Summit for WIA in Chicago, gosh, in October. And one of the sessions that I went to was the women from Little Architects, the CEO and two of her right-hand women were speaking about your career path. And I learned something that day from her, because when I was young, I always thought, I want to be a principal at this firm. I want to be the first non-technical principal. And why? Why did I want to do that? Just because that's like the upper echelon of what you could do in your career path. And the CEO from Little Architects had mentioned this presentation. When it's time for your review, please don't come at me with, I want to be this position now because I have 3 years of experience. That's what all my peers are at. I want to hear why you want that. What do you bring to the table that we currently don't have? You see a problem within the firm that you want to grab onto and you want to solve that problem. You want to understand more of the accounting side of the architecture life. You want to do more business development. What is it that you want to do that you see moving into that role would help you and the firm? And that was always, that was just an aha moment I had and something I wanted to share to this group as well. Those that succeed further in this career that I have seen through my 20 years are those that take a problem within the firm, kind of take ownership of it and help the firm solve it.
Yeah, I would agree. I was a very academic person, and it was actually very difficult to leave that setting of, there's something very linear and comforting about that. It's like you know when exams are, you know what to study. I read tremendously. Like I'm always shocked when people tell me they don't read. So I think that like reading more and then that like keeping that curiosity, and then kind of like the other everyone has mentioned, it's like, how could that be something that benefits your firm? So if you're researching things and it's like, hey, maybe I could share this. There's so many other opportunities to even speak. If you're like, anytime like Rachel and I start getting obsessed about an idea, we pitch it as a topic to be a presentation, and that turns into a deep dive. So I think there's always a way to keep learning and growing, and that's going to help like everything that's in your orbit, right? It's going to help you, your firm, the people you interact with, committees you volunteer for, things like that.
The next question. Always get one of these from a student. Would you all say you get paid fairly with the experience you have? Well, I can speak first because I'm a principal of a firm and I don't get paid fairly. And that's mainly because I'm trying very hard to pay the people that work for me, and doing it gladly. And they wouldn't say that I am. So it's difficult. It is very, very difficult. And you have people here from large firms. I'm a micro firm. And it is very hard to make clients on medium-sized projects understand that hours that we're devoting to your project translate to an hourly cost. And if you want us to be there for you, you need to pay all of those hours that we're there doing the work that you're doing. And obviously certain aspects are changing, how drawings are being produced, how buildings are being built. All of that is going to come into, what our industry is and what our profession is. The interesting thing about it is I think there are lots of avenues right now for us to shed light on that and to actually bring some parity, especially relating to, quite honestly, between the engineering world, the construction world. There's going to have to be parity among the professionals that are actually, especially on these large complex projects, bringing those projects to fruition in the time frame now that we need to do that.
That's
And
another
I
talk right there, I
I
think.
know, I was
Yeah,
about to
it
say,
is,
that's
it
a
is.
whole,
Whole
Um,
nother thing, yeah.
I'll chime in as somebody who shouldn't probably chime in because I don't have the pay scale that my architect friends do. But what I have noticed is, to me, it should depend on the work, not what you get paid. So if you truly love what you do, and you want to work for a firm that designs like the sexiest buildings you've ever seen in your life, from my observation, you're probably not going to get paid as much as, you know, much larger global firms who you may be just cranking out strip malls or data centers left, right, center. So I think it also depends on the type of work that you want to do. There's pluses and minuses that come with both of them. But at the end of the day, I just want everybody to be authentic, apparently, and to have joy. And so as long as you're loving the projects you're working on and the people you're working with, I think sometimes that maybe getting paid a little bit less, it all comes out in the wash, in my perspective.
I think this might be another salon topic, but for next time. But I think we might actually be at time. So to respect everyone's time, I want to first thank my amazing panelists. I knew we would just have so much fun, and we did. And I'm very happy that we had time for questions. I really want to thank our students for attending. This is really a labor of love. It is one of my very favorite things that we do here. So I'm really excited that you guys came and asked questions, chimed in with questions. I feel like we could have kept talking for longer. Ashton, did you want to close us out about the series as well as reminding people about the event tomorrow?
Yes. So as Janki mentioned, we have our in-person event tomorrow at Rodgers O'Brien Construction on South Lamar, if you're in the Austin area. And then we also, we do a lot of free events coming up. I know Alexandra earlier in the chat mentioned our newsletter. That is the best way to find out about everything that we have going on all year long. We do a lot of free stuff, both panels online, but also in-person events where you can network your little heart out. I do it all the time. Every time I come on, I meet Steno, and it's fantastic. So, Alexander just added all those links again. And then also we have our Instagram account, our LinkedIn account, and we pretty much post everything on there too. So if that's the route you like to, receive information, follow us on one of those. And then, in addition to tomorrow's happy hour, we have one other in-person event. It is free. It is also on South Lamar. It is our holiday party. It is on December 5th. We're having a tamale bar, and it's just come, mingle, mix, be, have fun. That's it. Surrounded by beautiful tile because it's in the doll tile showroom. So we hope to see you all at events, whether it be in person or virtual in the future. And thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you all for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you.
I have one more thing to add is since we have our very own Donna Carter here, for the UT Students of Architecture, we do have a scholarship that Women in Architecture gives out, and the applications are open. And we just renamed this year to the Donna D. Carter Women in Architecture Design Austin Scholarship. It's just for the UT Students School of Architecture here in Austin. So please, if you are a UT student, apply. The deadline is going to be February 3rd of 2025. And we look forward to seeing your submissions and seeing you in any of our in-person events.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Have a great one.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Bye.